About rules violations or official complaints, this is about something more subtle, more complicated, and potentially more divisive than any traditional cheating scandal. Players are privately voicing concerns about competitive fairness at Augusta National, and while nobody's using the word cheating publicly, the tension is real and it's building. What's actually happening that has players talking behind closed doors? Why is Rory's Masters preparation creating controversy despite being completely legal? And how could this situation change how future major championships are approached across professional golf? Let's be clear about what's actually happening here, because the reality is more nuanced than any headline suggests. Rory McIlroy is currently leading the Masters tournament and playing exceptional golf through the first two rounds. He looks comfortable, confident, and completely in control on a golf course that has historically given him trouble. His approach shots are precise, his putting stroke is solid, and he's navigating Augusta's challenges with a level of mastery that suggests deep familiarity with every slope, break, and grain on the property. That comfort and familiarity is exactly what's creating tension among other competitors. According to multiple sources speaking anonymously, several players in the Masters field have raised concerns about Rory's access to Augusta National in the months leading up to the tournament. Specifically, they're pointing to the fact that Rory was invited by members to play private rounds at Augusta multiple times before tournament week, giving him opportunities to study the course under conditions most competitors never experience. Now, here's the crucial point that needs to be emphasized. What Rory did is completely allowed within the rules governing the Masters. Augusta National is a private club, and members can invite guests to play rounds whenever they choose. There's no regulation preventing players from accepting those invitations, and Rory violated absolutely nothing by taking advantage of opportunities offered to him. This is not a cheating scandal in any traditional sense. Nobody's accusing Rory of breaking rules or acting dishonestly. If you want to understand why this is still controversial despite being legal, hit that like button and subscribe, because the dynamics here reveal something important about competitive fairness in golf. The concerned players are expressing centers on competitive advantage rather than rule violations. Augusta National is unlike any other golf course on the planet. The greens are faster and more sloped than standard tour setups. The way balls react on approach shots, how putts breaking, where you can and cannot land balls on certain holes, all of that knowledge is incredibly valuable and difficult to acquire without actually playing the course repeatedly. Most players in the Masters field get their Augusta experience during tournament week through practice rounds and the limited opportunities the club provides. Some players who've competed there for years have built up knowledge through repeated appearances, but that's experience earned through qualifying and competing, which everyone respects as fair. What's different about private member guest rounds is that they provide course knowledge without requiring competitive qualification or equal access. One player, speaking anonymously to Golf Media, essentially said that the more time you get on that course before the tournament, the bigger your competitive edge becomes. And when you watch Rory's performance through two rounds, the comfort level he's showing seems to validate that concern. He's hitting approaches to perfect spots, reading putts with confidence, and generally playing like someone who's seen these exact situations many times before. The frustration among competitors isn't directed at Rory personally, as much as it's about the broader issue of unequal access creating competitive imbalances. Golf prides itself on being a sport where everyone competes on level playing fields, where preparation and skill determine outcomes rather than connections or privileged access. When some players have opportunities to practice at major championship venues that others don't, it challenges that fundamental principle. What makes this situation particularly complicated is that it involves tradition clashing with modern competitive standards. Augusta National has always operated with a level of exclusivity and privacy that's central to its identity. Member guest privileges, private rounds, and the club's autonomous operations separate from PGA Tour control are all part of what makes the Masters unique. Changing those traditions to create more equal access would fundamentally alter the character of the event. But from a competitive perspective, those traditions create advantages that have nothing to do with golf skill. If player A has connections that get him invited for multiple private rounds and player B doesn't, they're not preparing for the same tournament on equal footing. That's the tension players are now voicing. And it's not an easy problem to solve without disrupting traditions that many believe are essential to what makes the Masters special. Reports indicate that some players have discussed bringing these concerns to the PGA Tour, not because the tour has jurisdiction over Augusta National, which it doesn't, but because it could spark broader conversations about preparation standards for major championships. Ideas being floated include clearer guidelines about pre-tournament access, or at least more transparency about who's playing private rounds, so everyone knows what kind of preparation their competitors are getting. However, there's significant division among players about whether this is even a problem that needs solving. Veterans and traditionalists argue that connections have always mattered in golf, that networking and relationships are part of professional sports, and that if you're fortunate enough to get invited to play Augusta privately, you should absolutely take that opportunity. From this perspective, Rory did nothing wrong and actually did exactly what any smart competitor would do when given access to valuable preparation opportunities. The counter-argument is that major championships should be competitions where golf skill determines outcomes, and that advantages derived from social connections rather than athletic ability undermine competitive integrity. This perspective doesn't accuse anyone of wrongdoing, but argues that the system itself creates unfair advantages that should be addressed. What's particularly interesting is how this conversation is playing out publicly versus privately. Publicly, very few players are willing to go on record criticizing Rory or the situation because doing so risks looking like sour grapes or attacking someone for taking opportunities anyone would accept. Privately, the conversations are much more frank, with players expressing genuine frustration about competing against someone who's had preparation advantages they couldn't access, regardless of their own efforts or abilities. Rory himself hasn't addressed these concerns directly because, from his perspective, there's nothing to address. He was invited to play golf at a course, he accepted those invitations, and he prepared for a major championship using legal and available opportunities. Asking him to apologize or justify that preparation would be unreasonable. At the same time, his silence on the broader fairness questions means the conversation continues without his input, which allows speculation and frustration to build. The PGA Tour is in an awkward position because Augusta National operates independently, and the Tour has no authority to regulate member guest access or practice round policies. Any changes would have to come from Augusta itself, and the club is notoriously resistant to external pressure or suggestions about how it should operate. The Masters has maintained its traditions and autonomy for decades, and the likelihood of Augusta changing its policies because some Tour players are uncomfortable seems minimal. What could force change is if this controversy affects how the tournament is perceived by fans and media. If the narrative becomes that the Masters isn't a pure competition because some players get unfair preparation advantages, that damages the event's credibility in ways Augusta wouldn't want. The club cares deeply about the Masters being viewed as the pinnacle of golf competition, and anything that undermines that perception could potentially motivate policy adjustments. If Rory, the rest of the field fears the most, because when pressure disappears, instinct takes over, and instinct is where greatness lives. This is the paradox of Augusta. The course that once exposed every weakness is now facing a player with nothing left to lose. Rory without pressure is more dangerous than Rory chasing it. He doesn't need this win. He doesn't need validation, and that is exactly what makes him feel untouchable. Because when a player of his caliber starts playing freely, the game begins to look unfair. But Augusta has never cared about momentum. It doesn't reward comfort, it punishes it. For 15 years, Rory McIlroy was the chaser. Every April, he walked into Augusta with the same mission: finish the story, complete the Grand Slam, silence the doubt. He was the one hunting history, the one trying to catch something that always seemed just out of reach. That chase defined him. It gave him purpose. It sharpened his focus. It turned pressure into fuel. But in 2026, that dynamic has flipped completely, because now Rory McIlroy is no longer chasing the Masters. The Masters is chasing him. This is the part no one talks about. Winning doesn't remove pressure. It transforms it. When you're chasing, failure is expected. There's freedom in that. You can take risks. You can recover. You can come back next year and try again. But when you've already won, when you've already proven everything, the equation changes. Now, every round is about preservation. Every mistake feels heavier. Every leaderboard shift feels more personal. Because you're no longer building something, you're trying not to lose it. And in 2026, the stakes are even higher. Back-to-back Masters victories are rare territory. Historic territory, the kind of achievement that doesn't just define a season, but a legacy. Rory isn't just playing to win anymore. He's playing to cement something permanent, to prove that last year wasn't the end of the story, but the beginning of something greater. And that kind of expectation doesn't disappear. It evolves, quietly, relentlessly, because freedom at this level is never absolute. It comes with a hidden cost. The weight is gone, but the spotlight is brighter. The pressure feels lighter, but the consequences are bigger. Rory McIlroy may look relaxed, but every player in the field is now measuring themselves against him. He has become the standard, the target, the one everyone believes they have to beat to win this tournament. And being the target is a very different game. So the question isn't whether Rory can win again. The question is whether he can handle what comes after, becoming unstoppable. Because when the chase is over and the dream is complete, something else takes its place. Something quieter, something more dangerous. What happens when the hunger that drove you is gone? Every great story needs a disruption. And at Augusta in 2026, that disruption has a name: Scottie Scheffler. While Rory McIlroy arrives as the defending champion, free and unburdened, Scheffler arrives as something far more dangerous. The world number one, the most consistent player in golf, the betting favorite to win it all. He is not chasing a moment. He is controlling one, and that makes him the one variable Rory cannot predict. Because Scheffler doesn't play golf the way Rory does. Rory is momentum, emotion, explosion. When he gets hot, the course feels too small to contain him. But Scheffler is the opposite. He doesn't surge, he suffocates. Fairways, greens, putts, over and over again. There are no swings, no chaos, just pressure that builds quietly until it becomes impossible to escape. He doesn't need brilliance to win. He just needs you to make a mistake. And eventually, everyone does. That's what makes this so uncomfortable for Rory. Freedom thrives in chaos, but Scheffler removes chaos from the equation entirely. He turns Augusta into a math problem. One shot at a time, one decision at a time. No emotion, no panic, just execution. And while Rory is playing with nothing to prove, Scheffler is playing with something sharper. Focus, the kind that doesn't drift, the kind that doesn't forgive. And then there's the human layer that makes him even more dangerous. Just days before arriving at Augusta, Scheffler became a father again. In a sport where mental clarity is everything, that kind of life shift can either distract you or center you completely. And for Scheffler, it looks like the latter. He isn't just playing for trophies, he's playing with purpose. And purpose at this level is a weapon. Because you don't beat Scottie Scheffler with brilliance. You beat him by being perfect. This isn't just another Masters. It's the story, the one everything else revolves around. Rory McIlroy, the man who finally conquered Augusta, now returns to defend it. Scottie Scheffler, the world number one, arrives to take it back. Every headline, every prediction, every conversation points to the same collision. Not just who will win, but who controls the moment. Because when two forces like this meet at Augusta, it stops being a tournament and starts becoming something else entirely. Rory is chasing something different now. Not validation, not redemption, legacy. Back-to-back Masters victories would place him in a different category of greatness, one reserved for players who didn't just win Augusta, but owned it. This is about proving that last year wasn't a breakthrough, it was a beginning. But chasing legacy is a different kind of pressure. It's quieter, heavier, because it asks one question: can you do it again when everyone expects you to? Scheffler's pursuit is simpler and somehow more dangerous. Control. For months, he has been the most reliable force in golf, the player who turns tournaments into slow, inevitable takeovers. Augusta represents something personal, a chance to remind the world that consistency beats momentum, that precision beats emotion, that he is still the standard every player is measured against. And unlike Rory, he doesn't need a story. He just needs execution. And then there's Augusta itself, because this course doesn't belong to either of them. It never has. It rewards patience. It punishes ego. It waits for the moment when confidence turns into assumption, and then it strikes. Rory thrives when he's chasing. Scheffler thrives when things are steady. But Augusta doesn't promise either. It creates uncertainty. And uncertainty changes everything, because this isn't just player versus player.